When the pieces of the silver necklace hit the floor of River Oak High, no one could have guessed it was the first fragment of a dark secret spanning 30 years. Emily Carter wasn't just a 17-year-old who lost her mother. She was the key to uncovering a conspiracy involving the most powerful families in town. A story of justice, American heritage, and truth that could no longer stay buried. Leave a comment about the secrets in your own hometown and prepare to immerse yourself in this unexpected journey through the heart of small-town America, where nothing is as it seems and everything you believe about your community might just be built on lies. The autumn wind scattered fallen leaves across the cracked concrete path of River Oak High School's courtyard. Emily Carter kept her head down as she walked, her long brown hair partially covering her face like a protective curtain. The weight of her backpack was nothing compared to the invisible burden she'd carried for the past 3 years. At 17, Emily had mastered the art of being forgettable, a shadow passing through the crowded hallways, a whisper lost in the cacophony of teenage life. Around her neck hung a silver maple leaf pendant, a piece so weathered that its engravings had begun to fade. But the single letter S remained visible at its center, a simple mark that contained her entire world. It had been her mother, Sarah Carter, who died in a car accident on Miller Bridge 3 years ago. Now it was Emily's only tangible connection to her. Emily adjusted her earbuds, turning up the volume on Fleetwood Mac's Landslide, her mother's favorite song. The familiar melody wrapped around her like a security blanket, drowning out the sounds of River Oak, Ohio, a town that hadn't changed much since World War II. The factory whistles still blew at the same times, the same families still ran everything, and secrets still remained buried beneath layers of small-town propriety. Lost in the music, Emily didn't notice the 3 girls approaching until they formed a barrier in her path. "Well, if it isn't Carter the martyr," Vanessa Reynolds said, her voice dripping with the confidence that came from being the daughter of Charles Reynolds, owner of Reynolds Enterprises and the town's primary employer. Emily removed one earbud, her expression carefully blank. Flanking Vanessa were her ever-present shadows. Brittany Cooper, whose father managed the town bank, and Stephanie Miller, the mayor's niece. They were River Oak royalty, their futures secured by family names that appeared on street signs and buildings throughout town. "Nice soundtrack," Vanessa continued, noting Emily's music choice. "Still listening to that ancient garbage. I guess being an orphan makes you, like, naturally depressing." Emily's fingers instinctively went to her necklace, a gesture that hadn't escaped Vanessa's notice over the years. The maple leaf pendant had become a target, a visible weakness in Emily's carefully constructed armor. "What's with that necklace anyway?" Brittany asked, stepping closer. "You're practically religious about it." "It's nothing," Emily muttered, attempting to step around them. Stephanie blocked her path. "Nothing, then you wouldn't mind if we took a closer look." Before Emily could react, Vanessa's manicured hands shot out, grabbing the pendant. The sudden movement sent a jolt of panic through Emily's chest. "Stop," she said, her voice sharper than intended. "Oh, she speaks!" Vanessa laughed, tugging harder. The chain dug into Emily's neck, and for a moment time seemed to slow. She saw the malice in Vanessa's eyes, the amused anticipation in Brittany's face, the nervous excitement in Stephanie's posture. 3 years of carefully contained emotions, grief, rage, loneliness, threatened to erupt. With a final yank, the chain snapped. The sound of breaking links was deafening in Emily's ears. The pendant flew from Vanessa's grasp, hitting the concrete courtyard with a sickening crack. Emily dropped to her knees, reaching for the silver maple leaf now lying in 2 pieces, the chain scattered in twisted links around it. "Oops," Vanessa said, her voice mocking any genuine remorse. "Guess it was as cheap as it looked." Emily's hand closed around the broken pendant, her fingertips tracing the jagged edge where it had split. The letter S was now divided half on each piece. "You know what they say," Vanessa continued, leaning down to whisper in Emily's ear. "Like mother, like daughter. Both of you, broken." The words penetrated deeper than any physical blow. Emily remained frozen as the 3 girls walked away, their laughter echoing across the courtyard. Other students hurried past, eyes averted, no one wanting to be associated with Emily Carter's humiliation. Only when the bell rang, signaling the start of 5th period, did Emily finally move. She carefully gathered every piece of the necklace, placing them in the small zippered pocket of her backpack. Then she stood, her face composed despite the storm raging inside her. Emily skipped her remaining classes, walking instead to the public park that stretched along the outskirts of River Oak. It was empty this time of day, the wooden benches weathered from years of harsh Ohio winters. She sat beneath an ancient oak tree, its branches nearly bare now in late October, and emptied the pocket containing the fragments of her necklace. In the fading afternoon light, she examined each piece, laying them out methodically on her jacket. The two halves of the pendant, the broken links of the chain, and something else, something she hadn't noticed before. When the pendant split, it had revealed a small compartment inside, barely visible along the seam, and within that compartment was a tightly folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, Emily extracted it, carefully unfolding what appeared to be a torn corner of notebook paper. On it was written a partial phone number and the initials WM. Emily stared at the faded ink, questions flooding her mind. Why had her mother hidden this inside the necklace? Who was WM? And why only part of a phone number? The discovery transformed her grief into something new. Curiosity, suspicion, a sense that there was more to her mother's death than a tragic accident on a rainy night. That evening, Emily returned to the small, two-bedroom house she shared with her father, James Carter. The modest home sat on the east side of town, far from the manicured lawns of the Reynolds neighborhood. Her father's truck wasn't in the driveway. He was working a double shift at the steel mill, again a common occurrence since Sarah's death. In the privacy of her bedroom, Emily laid the broken necklace and the mysterious note on her desk. With steady hands, she reached for the superglue she kept in her drawer. Piece by piece, she reconnected the chain links, her fingers working with precision born from years of disciplined practice. Then she carefully aligned the two halves of the maple leaf pendant. As she worked, memories surfaced, her mother fastening the necklace around her own neck each morning, the way Sarah would touch it when deep in thought, how she'd fidget with it during difficult conversations. Had there been fear in those gestures, worry Emily had been too young, too self-absorbed to notice. When the necklace was whole again, fragile but intact, Emily held it up to the light. The crack across the maple leaf was visible, a permanent scar that somehow made it more precious. The letter S was once again complete, though divided by a thin line of glue. Emily clasped it around her neck, the familiar weight settling against her collarbone. Then she tucked the mysterious note into her journal, hidden beneath her mattress. Whatever secret her mother had kept, Emily would protect it until she understood its meaning. Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams filled with images of her mother standing on Miller Bridge, trying to tell her something important while rain poured down and headlights approached from behind. The next morning, Emily walked through the halls of River Oak High with a new awareness. The necklace hung around her neck, its repair visible to anyone who looked closely enough. But it wasn't shame she felt now, it was defiance. In the 3 years since her mother's death, Emily had perfected invisibility, but today she stood straight, her gaze direct. Several students noticed the change, their eyes lingering on her longer than usual. The hushed whispers followed her to her locker, where she found Noah Freeman waiting. Noah was Emily's oldest friend, a lanky boy with unruly red hair and freckles scattered across his pale face. The son of the town librarian, he shared Emily's preference for books over people, history over gossip. He was one of the few who had stood by her after Sarah's death, when grief had transformed Emily from an outgoing child to a withdrawn teenager. "You look different today," Noah said, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "Something happened." Emily hesitated. Noah was trustworthy, but the note hidden in her journal felt too fragile to share. Instead, she touched the repaired necklace. "Vanessa broke it yesterday," she said. "I fixed it." Noah's eyes narrowed behind his glasses. "Reynolds and her lackeys again." He sighed. "You should report them." Emily almost laughed. "To who? Principal Warren, who plays golf with Charles Reynolds every Sunday? Or maybe Coach Phillips, whose salary comes from the Reynolds Foundation?" "Fair point," Noah conceded. "But this has been going on since freshman year. There has to be something." "There isn't," Emily cut him off. "Not in this town." The warning bell rang and students began hurrying to their classrooms. Noah gave her shoulder a supportive squeeze before heading to advanced placement physics. Emily made her way to American history, where she slid into her seat at the back of the room just as the final bell sounded. Ms. Cooper, a silver-haired woman who had taught at River Oak for over 40 years, began her lecture on the civil rights movement. At 72, Margaret Cooper was an institution herself, one of the few teachers who seemed immune to the Reynolds influence. Rumor had it she had tenure so secure that not even Charles Reynolds could touch her, though no one knew why. As Ms. Cooper described the courage of ordinary citizens standing against institutional power, Emily found herself more engaged than usual. There was something in the old teacher's voice, a personal connection to the material that went beyond textbook knowledge. "History isn't just about memorizing dates and names," Ms. Cooper said, her piercing blue eyes scanning the classroom. "It's about understanding that every community, every town, like River Oak, has its own untold stories of injustice and resistance. Her gaze lingered on Emily for a moment longer than necessary, a subtle emphasis that felt almost like a message. Emily straightened in her seat, wondering if she had imagined it. After class, as students filed out, Miss Cooper called Emily to her desk. "That's a beautiful necklace, Miss Carter," the elderly teacher said, her eyes focusing on the maple leaf pendant. "Though I notice it's been damaged recently." Emily's hand went to the necklace. "It broke, I fixed it." Ms. Cooper nodded, a knowing expression on her lined face. "Some things once broken are never quite the same. But sometimes," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "the breaking reveals what was hidden inside." A chill ran through Emily. Could Ms. Cooper know about the secret compartment, about the note? "Your mother wore that necklace every day," Ms. Cooper continued. "She was one of my brightest students, you know. Curious, determined, much like you." "You knew my mom?" Emily asked, surprised. Her mother had grown up in River Oak, but Emily had never heard her mention Ms. Cooper. "Indeed I did. Sarah was special. She asked questions others were afraid to ask." The old teacher's voice lowered. "This town doesn't much care for questions, Emily. Never has." Before Emily could respond, the door to the classroom opened and Principal Warren stepped in. His forced smile didn't reach his eyes as he looked between Emily and Miss Cooper. "Everything all right in here?" he asked, his tone suggesting it better be. "Just discussing Ms. Carter's excellent essay on the Pentagon Papers," Ms. Cooper replied smoothly. "Freedom of the press is such an important topic, don't you agree, Robert?" Principal Warren's smile tightened. "Of course, Margaret, but Emily should head to her next class. Wouldn't want her to be late." Emily gathered her books, the weight of the unfinished conversation heavy on her shoulders. As she passed Miss Cooper's desk, the teacher slipped a folded note into her hand, the movement hidden from Principal Warren's view. "Keep asking questions," Miss Cooper whispered. The rest of the morning passed in a blur, Emily's mind preoccupied with Miss Cooper's words and the note now burning a hole in her pocket. It wasn't until lunch period that she found a quiet corner in the library to unfold it. Written in a neat, precise script were just a few words: "Your mother found something. They're still watching. Trust old Frank at the garage." Emily read the note 3 times, her heart pounding. Old Frank. Frank Williams, the 70-year-old owner of Williams Auto Repair at the edge of town. Emily knew him only as the gruff, weathered man who occasionally nodded to her father at the diner. What could he possibly have to do with her mother? She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't notice Vanessa, Brittany, and Stephanie until they surrounded her table. "Reading love notes, Carter?" Vanessa sneered, reaching for the paper in Emily's hand. This time Emily was ready. She pulled the note away, tucking it quickly into her jacket pocket. "Back off, Vanessa." Brittany laughed. "Wow, the orphan found her voice." "And look," Stephanie added, pointing to Emily's necklace. "She actually tried to fix that piece of trash." Vanessa leaned closer, her expensive perfume overwhelming in the quiet library. "You should have just thrown it away. It's garbage now, just like your mom's rusty old car after they pulled it from the river." Something snapped inside Emily. 3 years of contained grief, of swallowed rage, of silent suffering, it all coalesced into a single moment of perfect clarity. "Say another word about my mother," Emily said, her voice eerily calm, "and you'll regret it." Vanessa's eyes widened in mock fear. "Is that a threat? What are you going to do, cry on me?" Emily stood slowly, her body tensed in a way that would have been familiar to anyone who had seen her in the dojang where she trained. But no one at River Oak High knew about Emily's other life, the one where 3 times a week for the past 9 years, she had channeled her emotions into the disciplined movements of Taekwondo. No one knew about this black belt she had earned 6 months after her mother's death, the hours she spent perfecting her technique, the tournaments she had won in neighboring counties where no one recognized the quiet girl from River Oak. "Last warning," Emily said quietly. "Walk away." Vanessa, mistaking Emily's calm for weakness, grabbed for the necklace again. "Or what, you'll—" She never finished the sentence. Emily's hand shot up, catching Vanessa's wrist in a grip precise enough to stop the movement without causing pain. The motion was controlled, efficient, nothing like the wild swings of a schoolyard fight. "Let go of me," Vanessa demanded, trying to pull away. Emily released her, immediately stepping back into a neutral stance. "Just leave me alone." But Stephanie, perhaps emboldened by Emily's retreat, shoved her hard against the bookshelf. "You don't tell us what to do, orphan girl." The library was nearly empty, the librarian on her lunch break. No witnesses except Noah, who had just entered and now stood frozen by the door. When Brittany grabbed Emily's jacket, trying to reach the note in her pocket, Emily's training took over. A simple wrist lock, a controlled pivot, and suddenly Brittany was gasping, her arm twisted in a hold that looked casual but felt immobilizing. "What the hell?" Stephanie exclaimed, lunging forward. Emily released Brittany and sidestepped Stephanie's charge, causing the girl to stumble into the table. Vanessa recovered from her shock, grabbed a heavy reference book, and swung it toward Emily's head. With a fluid motion, Emily blocked the improvised weapon, deflecting it away from her body. The book crashed to the floor as Emily executed a controlled low kick that swept Vanessa's legs from under her. The queen bee of River Oak High landed hard on her designer jeans, her expression transforming from anger to disbelief. "You're insane!" Vanessa gasped, scrambling backward. Emily stood in the center of the chaos, her breathing even, her stance balanced. 9 years of discipline had taught her control, how to defend without causing serious harm, how to end a confrontation quickly. "No," Emily said, her voice steady. "I'm just done being your victim." Noah hurried to her side, his eyes wide behind his glasses. "And we need to go. Now." Through the library windows, Emily could see a teacher responding to the commotion. She allowed Noah to pull her toward the emergency exit, leaving behind the 3 stunned girls in the quiet library, now in disarray. They didn't stop running until they reached the student parking lot, where Noah's ancient Volvo waited like a getaway car. Only when they were safely inside the doors locked did Emily's adrenaline begin to subside. "What the hell was that?" Noah demanded, his freckled face flushed with excitement and fear. "Since when can you fight like a black belt?" Emily finished for him, still remarkably calm. "Since I was 8, Mom thought it would build confidence." Noah stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. 9 years. You've been training for 9 years and never told me." Emily shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "It was private, something just for me." "Well, it's not private anymore," Noah said, starting the car. "You just took down the 3 most vindictive girls in school. By tomorrow, everyone will know." As they pulled out of the parking lot, Emily glanced back at the school building, where figures were now gathering at the library windows. The normal Emily would have been terrified of the consequences: suspension, her father's disappointment, the increased targeting that would surely follow. But something had changed when she repaired the necklace, when she discovered the hidden note, when Ms. Cooper had slipped her the message about Frank Williams. Emily Carter was no longer the girl who disappeared into the background. She was her mother's daughter, and it was time to start asking questions. By the next morning, as Noah had predicted, the story had spread throughout River Oak High like wildfire. The versions varied wildly. In some, Emily had merely defended herself. In others, she had single-handedly defeated the 3 popular girls in a martial arts showdown worthy of an action movie. Emily felt the stares as she walked through the hallways, the whispers that followed her like a shadow. Some students nodded in approval, others kept their distance, uncertain of this new dynamic. The invisibility she had cultivated for years had been stripped away in a single afternoon. Noah met her at her locker, his expression grave. "Principal Warren is looking for you," he said without preamble. "Vanessa's claiming you attacked them unprovoked." Emily had expected this. In River Oak, consequences were determined by family names, not facts. "Any witnesses come forward?" "Just me," Noah said. "And we both know how much weight the word of a librarian's son carries against the Reynolds family." Before Emily could respond, a voice came over the intercom. "Emily Carter to the principal's office, immediately." The walk to the administration wing felt like a march to execution. Students parted before her, their expressions a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. Outside Principal Warren's office, Emily took a deep breath, touching the repaired necklace for courage. Inside, she found not only Principal Warren, but also Charles Reynolds himself, Vanessa's father, CEO of Reynolds Enterprises and the most powerful man in River Oak. Tall and distinguished in an expensive suit, he stood by the window, his presence dominating the modest office. "Ms. Carter," Principal Warren began, his tone attempting severity, but undermined by the nervous glance he cast at Reynolds. "We have a serious situation on our hands." Charles Reynolds turned from the window, his steel gray eyes assessing Emily with cold calculation. Unlike his daughter, there was nothing impulsive about this man. Every word, every gesture seemed measured for maximum effect. "My daughter and her friends claim you assaulted them in the library yesterday," he said, his deep voice resonant with authority, unprovoked and with what appears to be trained violence. Emily met his gaze steadily. "That's not what happened." "3 girls with bruises say otherwise," Principal Warren interjected. "3 girls who have been bullying me for years," Emily countered, "who broke my necklace, my mother's necklace, just the day before." At the mention of Sarah Carter, something flickered across Charles Reynolds' face so briefly Emily almost missed it. Not anger or annoyance, but something closer to concern. "Be that as it may," Principal Warren continued, "violence is never the answer. Reynolds Enterprises has been generous enough to fund our anti-bullying program. Which clearly isn't working, Emily interrupted. Charles Reynolds raised a hand, silencing Principal Warren's sputtering response. Let's cut to the chase, Ms. Carter. You have a choice here, a 1-week suspension effective immediately, or we can pursue this further with the school board and potentially the authorities. The threat was clear: accept punishment or face worse consequences. In another time, the old Emily might have acquiesced, might have apologized to preserve what little peace she had. But the weight of the repaired necklace around her neck, the mystery of her mother's hidden note, Ms. Cooper's warning, and the revelation of her own strength had transformed her. Emily Carter was no longer afraid. I'll take the suspension, she said calmly. Charles Reynolds nodded, seemingly satisfied with her surrender. But as Emily turned to leave, he spoke again. That necklace, he said, his voice oddly strained. It was your mother's. Emily's hand went instinctively to the pendant. Yes. And it was damaged recently. Your daughter broke it, Emily replied, watching his reaction carefully. I fixed it. Again, that flicker of something, not guilt, not exactly fear, but disquiet. Charles Reynolds was not a man accustomed to disquiet. I see, he said finally. Well, we can certainly replace it. A gesture of goodwill. No, Emily cut him off firmly. It's not replaceable. She left the office before either man could respond, her mind racing. Charles Reynolds' interest in the necklace couldn't be coincidence, not after everything else. Something connected him to her mother, to the hidden note, to whatever secret lay beneath the surface of River Oak. In the empty hallway, Emily made a decision. If she was suspended for a week, she would use that time well. Starting with a visit to Williams Auto Repair. Frank Williams's garage sat at the edge of town, a relic from a time before chain stores and corporate efficiency. The weathered building had once been painted red, but decades of sun and snow had faded it to a muted rust color that blended with the autumn landscape. Emily parked her bicycle against the chain-link fence, taking in the collection of vintage cars in various states of repair that filled the lot. Frank specialized in restoring classic American automobiles, his clients coming from as far as Cleveland and Pittsburgh for his expertise. The sound of metal on metal led her to an open bay where an aging man in oil-stained coveralls worked beneath the raised hood of a 1967 Mustang. Frank Williams was a River Oak fixture, a Vietnam veteran with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and hands permanently darkened by engine grease. Rumor had it he'd once been a police officer before opening the garage, though Emily had never heard him confirm this. Mr. Williams, she called, keeping a respectful distance. The old mechanic straightened, wincing slightly as his back protested. His weathered face registered surprise, then recognition. Carter's girl, he said, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes. Didn't expect to see you here. Emily stepped closer, suddenly uncertain. Ms. Cooper's note had said to trust Frank, but now that she was here, the whole thing seemed absurd. What could this gruff old man possibly know about her mother? I'm Emily, she said unnecessarily. Frank wiped his hands on a rag, his sharp eyes still keen despite his 70 years taking in her appearance. School let out early today. I'm suspended, Emily admitted, for a week. This seemed to amuse him. Suspended you, he chuckled. Let me guess, it has something to do with why Vanessa Reynolds is wearing sunglasses indoors to hide a black eye. Emily's eyes widened. She doesn't have a black eye. I didn't hit her face. Ah, Frank nodded as if she'd confirmed something. So you did stand up to her. Good. He gestured toward a small office attached to the garage. Come on in. I've been expecting you. The office was cluttered, but organized in a system only Frank could decipher. Vintage car parts catalogs shared shelf space with what looked like old police procedural manuals. A bulletin board covered one wall, layers of papers, photographs, and news clippings pinned haphazardly upon it. Frank closed the door and pulled the blinds, his movements deliberate. From a locked drawer, he retrieved a yellowed newspaper clipping and placed it on the desk between them. You know why you're here, he asked. Emily hesitated, then reached for her necklace. Miss Cooper said I should trust you. She said you knew my mom. Frank's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Margaret Cooper, one of the few people in this town with a spine. He tapped the newspaper clipping. Your mother and I were friends, more than friends. We were working together. Emily leaned forward, examining the clipping. It was from the River Oak Gazette, dated August 1992, 17 years ago. The headline read, Local Woman Missing Foul Play Suspected. The accompanying photograph showed a young woman with dark hair and a serious expression. Diane Matthews, 29, research assistant at Reynolds Laboratories, has been missing for 3 days, the caption read. I don't understand, Emily said, looking up at Frank. Who is Diane Matthews? What does this have to do with my mom? Frank sank into the creaking office chair, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. Your mother found a pattern. Diane was just the first. There were others over the years, people who worked for Reynolds who discovered things they shouldn't have, who then had accidents or simply disappeared. A chill ran through Emily as Frank continued. Sarah came to me about 3 years ago. She'd been researching water quality reports, something about abnormal test results being buried. She found my name in some old police records and thought I might help. You were a cop, Emily asked. Frank nodded. 20 years on the River Oak force. I was the lead investigator on Diane's disappearance until the case was suddenly reassigned and then closed. That's when I knew the corruption went all the way to the top. Emily's mind was reeling. Are you saying my mom's accident wasn't an accident? I'm saying your mother was asking dangerous questions, Frank replied carefully. And in this town that's never been healthy. Emily pulled out the folded piece of paper she'd found inside the necklace. She hid this. Do you know who WM is? Frank's eyes widened at the sight of the note. William Morrison, investigative reporter from Cleveland. He was working with Sarah looking into Reynolds Enterprises. Went missing about a year before your mother's accident. The pieces were starting to align in Emily's mind, forming a picture more terrifying than she had imagined. You think Reynolds had something to do with my mom's death, that they killed her? Frank chose his words carefully. I think your mother found something they didn't want found. Something big enough to silence her permanently. Emily felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her. For 3 years, she had mourned her mother's death as a tragic accident. A rain-slicked road, a failed brake line, a car plunging off Miller Bridge into the cold river below. The idea that it might have been deliberate, that someone had taken Sarah from her. I need proof, she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. If what you're saying is true, I need evidence. Frank studied her for a long moment, assessing. Then he stood and moved to the bulletin board, removing several layers of papers to reveal what was hidden beneath a makeshift investigation board with photographs, documents, and red string connecting various points. I've been gathering evidence for 25 years, he said. Your mother added to it. But we've never found the smoking gun, the one piece of evidence that would bring down Reynolds and everyone protecting him. Emily approached the board, taking in the faces Diane Matthews, William Morrison, and others she didn't recognize. Newspaper articles about industrial accidents, property acquisitions, zoning changes. Environmental reports with sections highlighted in yellow. And there in the center, a photograph of Miller Bridge with an X marked at the spot where her mother's car had broken through the guardrail. Why are you showing me this? Emily asked. I'm 17. What can I do that you and my mother couldn't? Frank's gaze was penetrating. Because you're Sarah's daughter. Because that necklace was more than a keepsake, it was insurance. And because Charles Reynolds' reaction to you standing up to his daughter tells me he's afraid of what you might know or find. He placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. Most importantly, because you have a right to the truth. Your mother was trying to protect this town, to protect you. She'd want you to know what she died for. Emily touched the repaired necklace, feeling the seam where the two halves joined. What was she investigating? What could be worth killing for? Frank turned back to the investigation board, pointing to a series of medical reports. Rare cancers, unusual birth defects, respiratory diseases, all occurring at rates far above the national average, but all within a 20-mile radius of River Oak, and all potentially linked to chemical compounds developed at Reynolds Laboratories. If that's true, why hasn't anyone stopped them? The EPA, the state. Reynolds Enterprises employs half the town, Frank interrupted. Their donations build our schools, fund our police department, keep our hospitals open. And Charles Reynolds has friends in Columbus and Washington, powerful friends. Emily thought of Principal Warren's deference, of how the entire school system seemed to operate around the Reynolds family's desires. It wasn't hard to imagine that influence extending to law enforcement, to local government, perhaps even beyond. So what do we do? She asked. Frank smiled for the first time, a grim, determined expression that transformed his weathered face. We find what your mother was looking for, and we finish what she started. Outside the garage, neither of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street, its tinted windows concealing the driver, who watched the old mechanic and the teenage girl with calculated interest. Nor did they see the camera lens capturing their meeting, documenting the first steps of Emily Carter's journey into River Oak's darkest secrets. Inside the pendant around Emily's neck, the two halves of the maple leaf held together by glue and determination, just like the fractured truth of her mother's legacy, broken but not destroyed, waiting to be made whole again. The black sedan followed Emily at a distance as she pedaled her bicycle away from Williams Auto Repair. The driver maintained a careful gap, experienced enough to track without being noticed. Inside the vehicle, a man spoke quietly into a phone. "She's leaving Williams' place now. Spent almost an hour inside." On the other end, Charles Reynolds' voice was terse. "Just observe, don't engage. And if she goes somewhere else, follow her. Document everything, but don't under any circumstances approach the girl." The call ended, and the sedan continued its surveillance, tracking Emily as she made her way not toward home, but to the River Oak Public Library. Unaware of her shadow, Emily locked her bike and entered the red brick building where Noah's mother had worked for 20 years. The library was one of the few spaces in town not visibly branded with the Reynolds name, its funding coming primarily from county taxes rather than corporate donations. Martha Freeman looked up from the circulation desk, her kind face creasing with concern when she saw Emily. News traveled fast in small towns. "Emily, dear, Noah told me what happened at school. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Freeman. Is Noah here?" "In the archives room." She lowered her voice. "He said you might come by. Whatever you two are up to, please be careful." The gentle warning in her tone made Emily wonder how much Noah had shared with his mother. But she just nodded and made her way to the back of the library. The archives room housed River Oaks Historical Records Town Council, minutes-old newspapers, yearbooks, and community photographs dating back to the town's founding in 1824. It was Noah's favorite hideout, a quiet space where few students ever ventured. She found him hunched over a microfilm reader, his red hair falling across his forehead as he squinted at the screen. He looked up when the door opened, relief washing over his face. "Finally, I've been digging since lunch." He motioned her over. "You're not going to believe what I found." Emily slid into the chair beside him. "What are we looking for exactly?" "After what happened in the library, I got curious about why the Reynolds family has it out for you specifically." He adjusted the microfilm, focusing on a newspaper from 1980. So I started looking into your mom's history with them." The screen showed a grainy photograph of a much younger Charles Reynolds cutting a ribbon at a facility opening. Beside him stood a group of officials and scientists in lab coats. "Reynolds Laboratories opens new research wing," the headline announced. "Look who's in the back row," Noah said, pointing to a young woman partially obscured by taller colleagues. Emily leaned closer, her breath catching. "That's my mom, Sarah Carter, research assistant." Noah read from the caption. "She worked for Reynolds M before you were born." Emily sat back, processing this revelation. "Frank Williams just told me the same thing. He said Mom was investigating Reynolds Enterprises when she died." Noah's eyes widened. "Old Frank from the garage? What's he got to do with this?" Emily hesitated, then decided to trust Noah completely. She told him everything: the hidden note in the necklace, Ms. Cooper's message, Frank's investigation board, and the suspicion that her mother's accident might have been deliberate. Noah listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly troubled. When she finished, he ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit since childhood. "This is bigger than I thought. I figured Vanessa was just being cruel, not that there might be an actual conspiracy involving her dad." "I need to know what my mom found," Emily said. "Frank thinks it was evidence of environmental contamination, something about unusual cancer rates and birth defects." Noah nodded, rolling his chair to a filing cabinet. "That tracks with what I've been finding. Look at these." He spread several documents on the table: public health statistics for River Oak County, spanning 30 years. Emily wasn't sure what she was looking at until Noah pointed to highlighted sections. "See these spikes starting in 1986, 3 years after Reynolds Laboratories opened their chemical research division, certain health issues increased dramatically. Thyroid disorders up 300%. Rare cancers up 180%. Birth defects affecting the central nervous system up 250%. Emily scanned the numbers, a chill spreading through her. If this is true, why hasn't anyone connected the dots? Because the data is fragmented across different agencies. It took me hours just to compile these few reports. Noah pulled out another document, a map of River Oak County with red circles marking various locations. And look at the distribution pattern. The highest concentration of cases forms a perfect radius around the old water treatment facility. Emily remembered Frank's bulletin board, the highlighted environmental reports. Mom was researching water quality reports before she died. The facility was decommissioned in 2000 after Reynolds funded a new one on the other side of town, Noah continued. The old building's still there, abandoned. A plan was forming in Emily's mind. "We need to see it." Noah's freckled face paled. The old treatment plant, it's been locked up for years, probably not even safe. My mom thought it was important enough to risk her life investigating, Emily said. I need to know why. Noah hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but not today. We need to prepare, bring flashlights, maybe a camera. And we should go when no one will notice, like tomorrow night. Emily agreed, though every instinct urged immediate action. They spent the next hour copying documents and compiling a timeline of Reynolds Enterprises' expansion alongside the town's health statistics. As they worked, Martha Freeman entered the archives room with 2 cups of tea. She set them down, then closed the door behind her, her expression uncharacteristically serious. Noah told me about what's happening, she said quietly, about your suspicions regarding your mother's accident. Emily shot Noah a questioning look, but he shook his head. I didn't tell her everything. Martha sighed. You didn't have to. I knew Sarah. We weren't close friends, but she came here often in those last months researching Old Town records. She hesitated. She was scared, Emily. I could see it in her eyes. Did she tell you why? Emily asked. No, but a week before the accident, she gave me something to keep safe. Martha reached into her pocket and withdrew a small USB drive. She said if anything happened to her, I should give this to you when you were old enough to understand. Emily stared at the drive, her heart pounding. What's on it? I don't know. Sarah made me promise not to look, said it would be safer that way. Martha placed the drive in Emily's palm, closing her fingers over it. I think you're old enough now. After Martha left, Emily and Noah huddled over a computer, inserting the drive with trembling fingers. It contained a single encrypted file requiring a password. Try your birthday, Noah suggested. Emily typed in the numbers 0321198, access denied. Her birthday, Noah offered. 5081975, access denied. Emily thought for a moment, then touched her necklace. The maple leaf pendant with its engraved S, not for Sarah, she suddenly realized, but for something else. Something that mattered enough to hide a secret message inside. She typed sunfish. The file opened, revealing dozens of documents. Water test results, internal memos, photographs of industrial waste containers, and a video file labeled evidence. Emily clicked on the video. Her mother's face filled the screen, younger and more frightened than Emily remembered her. Sarah Carter looked over her shoulder before speaking in a hushed voice. If you're watching this, something has happened to me. Everything I've gathered is on this drive, proof that Reynolds Enterprises has been illegally dumping chemical waste into River Oaks groundwater for decades. The compound, RF-27, was deemed too dangerous for commercial development in 1984, but Charles Reynolds continued researching it in secret. Sarah held up a document with the Reynolds logo. This internal memo acknowledges the link between RF-27 and the health issues in River Oak, but they buried it. They've been covering up the evidence, silencing whistleblowers. Diane Matthews found the same evidence in '92 and disappeared. William Morrison was getting close in 2018, and now he's gone too. Her mother looked directly into the camera, her eyes filled with determination. I'm meeting with a federal prosecutor next week. By the time you see this, Reynolds should be facing criminal charges. If not, if something happens to me, take this to someone you trust outside of River Oak. This town is in Reynolds' pocket, from the mayor to the police chief. The video ended, leaving Emily and Noah in stunned silence. The truth was worse than Emily had imagined. Not just evidence of contamination, but deliberate poisoning, a cover-up spanning decades, and her mother directly connecting Reynolds to the disappearances of others who had discovered the truth. We need to copy this, Noah said, finally, his voice shaking. Multiple copies hidden in different places. Emily nodded, still processing her mother's words. She was going to expose them. She had everything she needed. And they stopped her before she could, Noah finished grimly. As they began copying the files, neither noticed the library's security camera. In the corner of the room, its red light blinking steadily, capturing their discovery and relaying it to systems far beyond the small-town library. Emily didn't go home that night. The USB drive felt like a live grenade in her pocket, too dangerous to keep at her house where her father might find it too valuable to leave anywhere unsecured. Noah's suggestion that they stay at his house, where his mother could watch over them, seemed the safest option. James Carter sounded tired when Emily called to explain she was staying at the Freemans to work on a project. He didn't question it. Long hours at the steel mill had accustomed him to Emily's independence. Still, there was concern in his voice when he mentioned her suspension. You sure you're okay, Em? This isn't like you. I'm fine, Dad, she assured him, guilt twisting in her stomach at the half-truth. Just standing up for myself. Your mother would be proud, he said, and the simple statement nearly broke her composure. Did he have any idea what Sarah had been investigating? Had he suspected that her death wasn't an accident? These questions burned in Emily's mind as she lay awake on the Freemans' living room couch, listening to the house settle in the October night. They had made 3 copies of the USB contents, one hidden in Noah's room, one in Martha's personal safe, and one uploaded to a secure cloud account Noah had created using a VPN to mask their location. Tomorrow they would explore the abandoned water treatment facility, looking for physical evidence to corroborate the documents. But then what her mother had planned to take the evidence to a federal prosecutor. Who could Emily trust with this information now? Morning brought no clarity, just a steely resolve to continue what her mother had started. Martha made them breakfast, her worried gaze following their movements as they prepared for the day. I called the school, she told them. Said Noah's helping me with library inventory today. Principal Warren didn't question it. Emily thanked her, understanding the risk Martha was taking by becoming involved. In River Oak, opposing the Reynolds family had consequences. They spent the morning reviewing Sarah's files in detail, creating a comprehensive timeline of Reynolds Enterprises' activities and the corresponding health issues in the community. The picture that emerged was damning: a corporate giant sacrificing public health for profit, protected by a network of officials either bought off or intimidated into silence. By afternoon, they had formulated a plan to visit the abandoned water treatment facility after dark. But first, Emily needed to check in with Frank Williams. The old mechanic might have additional insights about the facility's layout or security. As she approached Williams Auto Repair, Emily noticed immediately that something was wrong. The garage doors were closed, a closed sign hanging in the window despite it being regular business hours. More concerning were the 2 police cruisers parked in front. She kept her distance, watching from behind a neighboring building as officers Brennan and Collins, both longtime friends of Charles Reynolds, emerged from the garage. Frank Williams followed, his hands cuffed behind his back. Frank Williams, you're under arrest for possession of stolen property, Officer Brennan announced loudly, though there was no audience beyond Emily's hidden presence. This is bullshit, and you know it, Frank growled as they led him to the cruiser. Those parts were legally purchased. Reynolds is behind this. You have the right to remain silent. Officer Collins continued, pressing Frank's head down as he was placed in the back seat. I suggest you use it. Emily watched in horror as they drove away, taking with them her strongest ally, and perhaps the only person in town who fully understood what they were up against. This was no coincidence. It was retaliation, a message. They knew she had been to see Frank. They were watching her. Heart pounding, and Emily raced back to the Freeman house, constantly checking to ensure she wasn't followed. Noah and Martha listened in dismay as she recounted what she'd witnessed. They're eliminating anyone who might help you, Martha said, her face pale. We need to be careful. We need to move faster, Emily countered, before they come after us too. Noah looked between them, conflict evident in his expression. Maybe we should take what we have to the state police now. Or the FBI. Why risk going to the treatment plant at all? Because they'll want physical evidence, Emily insisted. Documents can be dismissed as forgeries, especially when they implicate someone as powerful as Charles Reynolds. We need samples for photographs of the actual site proof that can't be denied. Martha reluctantly agreed. She's right. The authorities won't act against Reynolds without irrefutable evidence. Too many careers would be destroyed if they moved prematurely and failed. The plan was set. After dark, they would visit the abandoned facility, document whatever they found, and then Martha would drive them to the state police barracks in Columbus the next morning, far enough from River Oak to hopefully escape Reynolds' influence. As dusk approached, Emily borrowed Noah's phone to make one last call to her father. If things went wrong, she couldn't bear the thought of him wondering what had happened to her as she had wondered about her mother. James Carter answered on the 4th ring, the sound of the steel mill's machinery loud in the background. Noah, is Emily okay? It's me, Dad, Emily said, her throat tight with emotion. I'm borrowing his phone. Everything all right? You sound strange. Emily closed her eyes, choosing her words carefully. Dad, did Mom ever talk to you about her work at Reynolds Laboratories before I was born? A long silence followed, broken only by the distant clanging of metal. When James spoke again, his voice was different, harder, more alert. Who's been talking to you about that? I found something, Emily said, about Mom's accident. I don't think it was an accident at all. Where are you? The background noise suddenly diminished as if he'd moved to a quieter location. Emily, listen to me. Don't do anything. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming to get you right now. The urgency in his voice confirmed her suspicions. You knew, didn't you? You knew she was investigating Reynolds. It's complicated, James said, his voice strained. Your mother, She was passionate about exposing the truth, but she didn't tell me everything. She wanted to protect me, to protect you. Did Reynolds kill her? Emily asked directly, needing to hear the answer. Another pause. I've never been able to prove it, but I've always believed it. The sound of keys jangling came through the phone. Tell me where you are. We'll talk about everything, I promise. Emily hesitated. She trusted her father, but involving him now might put him in danger too. I can't, Dad. Not yet. But I'm close to finding the proof Mom was looking for. By tomorrow, everyone will know what Reynolds did. Emily, no, whatever you're planning? The fear in his voice was palpable. This isn't a game. These people are dangerous. I know, Emily said softly. Mom knew too, but she still fought for the truth. I have to finish what she started. Please, James begged, just wait for me. We can do this together. I love you, Dad, Emily said, ending the call before her resolve could weaken. Noah looked at her questioningly. What did he say? He knows, Emily confirmed. He's always suspected about Mom's accident, but he doesn't have proof either. Martha Freeman placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. But Emily had made her decision. With the repaired necklace hanging around her neck like a talisman, she was ready to face whatever awaited them at the abandoned treatment facility, ready to uncover the truth that had cost her mother her life. The old water treatment plant stood like a decaying fortress at the edge of town, surrounded by chain-link fence topped with rusted barbed wire. Once a point of pride for River Oak, when it opened in 1956, it had been replaced by a modern facility across town in 2000, funded by a generous donation from Reynolds Enterprises. Emily, Noah, and Martha parked a quarter-mile away, approaching on foot through the surrounding woods. The October night was moonless, their path illuminated only by the narrow beams of their flashlights. Each carried a backpack containing sample containers, cameras, gloves, and masks equipment Martha had borrowed from the high school science department through her librarian connections. There's a maintenance access on the north side, Noah whispered, consulting a facility map he'd found in the town archives. Should be less visible from the road. They circled the perimeter until they reached a section where the fence met a concrete drainage channel. The fence here had been cut and repaired multiple times, evidence that they weren't the first to seek entry. Noah worked on the fence with wire cutters, creating an opening just large enough to slip through. Emily went first, then Martha with Noah following and attempting to pull the fence closed behind them. The facility loomed before them, a sprawling concrete structure with high narrow windows and massive intake pipes extending toward the river. Most ominous was the complete absence of sound, no mechanical hum, no dripping water, just the eerie silence of abandonment. The main testing lab should be in the east wing, Martha said, consulting the map by flashlight. That's where they would have monitored water quality. They moved cautiously through an unlocked side door, entering a corridor lined with peeling institutional green paint. Their flashlight beams revealed debris-strewn floors and walls marked with graffiti, evidence of teenage visitors seeking thrills rather than truth. The air grew thick as they penetrated deeper into the building, heavy with the smell of mildew, and something else, a chemical odor that burned the back of Emily's throat despite the mask she wore. This place should have been stripped when they decommissioned it, Noah remarked, shining his light on rusted equipment still bolted to the floors. Why leave everything behind? Too expensive to remove safely, maybe, Martha suggested. Or they wanted to avoid questions about contamination. They found the main laboratory, a large room filled with workbenches, sinks, and complex filtration systems. Dust covered every surface, but underneath lay abandoned testing equipment, logbooks, and supply cabinets, still stocked with chemicals in faded yellowing containers. This isn't right, Martha said, examining the logbooks. These records should have been archived or destroyed according to protocol. It's like they just walked away one day and never came back. Emily approached a locked cabinet marked Restricted Access, RE Personnel Only. The Reynolds Enterprises logo was still visible on the peeling label. This is it, she whispered. This is what we're looking for. Noah worked on the cabinet lock while Emily photographed the room and Martha collected samples from various surfaces. The cabinet finally opened with a protesting screech of metal, revealing shelves of carefully labeled samples and research notebooks. RF-27 trial results. Emily read from one binder, her flashlight illuminating the Reynolds logo on its cover. She flipped it open, revealing page after page of test results, chemical formulas, and observation notes. This is exactly what Mom was talking about in her video. Noah pulled out a set of vials containing a cloudy liquid. Look at the dates. These tests continued until 2016, 16 years after this facility was supposedly decommissioned. They were using this place as a secret lab, Martha realized. Running tests they couldn't conduct at their official facilities because of regulations. Emily photographed everything methodically, the notebooks, the vials, the testing equipment. They collected samples of the mysterious compound, carefully sealing them in the containers they'd brought. "We need to check the filtration system," Emily said, recalling a detail from her mother's files. Mom suspected they were bypassing it, dumping chemicals directly into the river. They followed the massive pipes to a control room filled with gauges, valves, and a large schematic map of the facility's water flow. Noah examined it closely, tracing the paths with his finger. "Here," he said, pointing to an unmarked pipe junction. "This bypass wasn't on the official plans. It connects directly to the outflow pipe, completely circumventing the filtration process." Martha photographed the schematic while Emily examined the control panel. Most switches were in the off position, but one section remained active, its small indicator light glowing red in the darkness. "Something's still running," she said, tracing the corresponding pipe on the schematic. It led to a lower level not shown on their map. "There's a basement," Noah asked, nervousness creeping into his voice. Emily nodded, determination overriding her fear. "And it's still operational. We need to see what's down there." They found the stairwell leading down its metal steps, descending into darkness so complete their flashlights seemed to be swallowed by it. The chemical smell grew stronger as they descended, forcing them to pull their masks tighter. The basement level opened into a vast concrete chamber dominated by massive tanks and a network of newer pipes clearly installed long after the facility's official closure. Unlike the abandoned equipment upstairs, these systems appeared maintained their surfaces free of dust and their gauges functional. "This is impossible," Martha whispered. "The town records show this place hasn't used power in 20 years. "They must have a separate connection," Noah suggested, examining a modern control panel. "Off the grid, unmonitored." Emily approached the largest tank, her flashlight revealing a sample port on its side. Following the protocols Martha had reviewed with them, she carefully extracted a sample of the viscous, dark liquid inside. "What is this place?" Noah asked, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "Why maintain a secret operation in an abandoned facility?" "Because no one would think to look here," came a voice from the darkness beyond their flashlight beams. "No one except Sarah Carter's daughter." Emily froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew that voice. They all did. Charles Reynolds stepped into the circle of their combined flashlight beams, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit despite the late hour and surroundings. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood Brandon Reynolds, Vanessa's older brother, and two men Emily didn't recognize, their expressions grim and their postures suggesting military or security training. "I'm impressed you made it this far," Charles said, his tone conversational, as if they'd met at a town function rather than a secret dumping facility. "Your mother would be proud. She was just as persistent." Emily's hand tightened around the sample container, sliding it into her pocket as subtly as possible. "What is this place? What are you doing here?" Charles smiled thinly. "Progress, Ms. Carter, the kind that can't happen under the restrictive eye of federal regulations. RF-27 could revolutionize industrial chemistry, but short-sighted bureaucrats shut down official research because of a few unfortunate side effects." "Side effects?" Martha's voice shook with anger. "You mean the cancers, the birth defects, the people who've died because of your progress." "Sacrifices for the greater good," Charles replied dismissively. "Every major advancement has its costs. River Oak has prospered because of Reynolds Enterprises. We provide jobs, security, community stability." "You've been poisoning people for decades," Emily countered, her fear giving way to rage. "My mother found out, and you killed her for it." Something flickered across Charles' face, not guilt, but annoyance, as if her accusation were a minor inconvenience rather than a charge of murder. "Sarah Carter was an idealist who couldn't see the bigger picture," he said. "We offered her a place in the project recognition, financial security for you and your father. She chose poorly." Noah had been inching toward the stairs, but Brandon moved to block his path. "Going somewhere, Freeman? This is a private meeting." "How did you know we were here?" Emily asked, trying to keep Charles talking while her mind raced for an escape plan. Charles removed a phone from his pocket, displaying a security app with multiple camera feeds, including one showing the three of them entering the facility. "Did you think we'd leave this place truly abandoned?" He chuckled. "We've been monitoring your investigations since you visited Frank Williams. Quite thorough for teenagers, I must say." "Frank," Martha said. "What have you done to him?" "Nothing permanent," Charles assured her. Just a reminder about the consequences of betraying old confidences. He'll serve a few months for possession of stolen auto parts, then return to his quiet retirement, assuming, of course, that certain discoveries aren't made public. The threat was clear. Frank's fate, perhaps all their fates, depended on what happened to the evidence they'd collected. Now, Charles continued extending his hand. The samples, the photographs, and the drive your mother created. All of them, please. Emily stood her ground. And if we refuse, Brandon laughed, the sound echoing harshly off the concrete walls. Then this becomes a recovery operation instead of a negotiation. Either way, we get what we want. You can't just make us disappear. Noah protested, though his voice betrayed his fear. People know where we are. Do they? Charles raised an eyebrow. 3 trespassers in an abandoned facility. Perhaps you fell through a weakened floor or triggered a release of old chemicals. Industrial accidents are tragically common in these situations. Emily's mind flashed to her mother, to Diane Matthews, to William Morrison, all people who had stood where she now stood, facing the same choice between surrender and resistance. Her hand went to her necklace, fingers tracing the repaired seam of the maple leaf pendant. Her mother had chosen truth over safety. She had chosen to fight even knowing the risks. In that moment, Emily made the same choice. My father knows everything, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. If anything happens to us, he takes the evidence straight to the FBI. Charles's confident expression faltered slightly. James, I doubt that. Your father has been remarkably incurious about his wife's activities for someone so allegedly devoted to her. Call him and find out, Emily challenged. He's on his way here right now. It was a bluff, but a calculated one. Her phone call to James earlier had clearly rattled him. If he'd taken her concerns seriously, he might indeed be looking for her. Charles studied her for a long moment, then nodded to one of the security men who spoke quietly into a radio. The tension in the room thickened as they waited for a response. When it came, the security man's expression betrayed the answer before he spoke. Sir, we have a situation at the main gate. James Carter is demanding entry, threatening to call state police. He's with someone looks like Daniel Morrison. The name hit Emily like an electric shock. Morrison, the same last name as W.M. William Morrison, the missing reporter. Could his son be involved? Charles's composed facade cracked, revealing a flash of genuine concern. Secure them both. No marks, nothing traceable. The order chilled Emily to her core. Whatever happened next would determine not just her fate, but her father's as well. You won't get away with this, Martha said, her librarian's calm giving way to maternal fury. Even Reynolds Enterprises can't cover up 4 disappearances in one night. You'd be surprised what can be managed with the right resources, Charles replied, regaining his composure. But I'd prefer a cleaner solution. He turned to Emily. Your mother made this same choice, Ms. Carter. Principles over pragmatism. Look where it got her. Emily thought of her mother's courage, of the truth she'd died protecting, of the repaired necklace that had led Emily here to this moment of decision. My mother stood up to you, Emily said, straightening to her full height, and now I'm doing the same. In the heavy silence that followed, a new sound penetrated the basement chamber, a distant wailing that grew steadily louder. Police sirens. Charles's head snapped up, genuine surprise crossing his features. What is this? The security man checked his phone. Multiple units approaching from town, not responding to our channel. For the first time, uncertainty entered Charles Reynolds' expression. His careful plans were unraveling variables he hadn't accounted for suddenly in play. Brandon stepped toward Emily, his face twisted with anger. What did you do? Emily was as confused as they were, but she wasn't about to show it. I told you people know we're here. The sirens grew louder now, accompanied by the sound of vehicles pulling up outside the facility. Charles moved toward the stairs, gesturing for his security team to gather their group. Bring them. We're leaving through the north tunnel. As Brandon reached for Emily's arm, she reacted instinctively, falling back on years of taekwondo training. A precise strike to his solar plexus doubled him over, while a sweeping kick knocked his legs from under him. He crashed to the floor, gasping for breath. The security men rushed forward, but Emily was already moving, positioning herself protectively in front of Martha and Noah. Her stance was balanced, hands raised in a guard position that clearly communicated her training. Stay back, she warned, voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. The hesitation in their advance was all the opening Noah needed. With a sudden movement, he grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher and discharged it, filling the space between them with a cloud of white chemical fog. Run, Emily shouted, pushing Martha toward a side passage she'd noticed earlier. They fled through the maze of pipes and tanks pursued by shouts and the beam of flashlights cutting through the extinguisher haze. The passage led to a maintenance ladder that Emily climbed first, pushing open a heavy metal hatch that emerged outside the facility near the river's edge. As Martha and Noah emerged behind her, Emily could see emergency lights flashing at the main entrance. Police officers were surrounding the building, some already entering through the front doors. There, Noah pointed to a familiar figure standing beside a police car, Frank Williams no longer in handcuffs, but gesturing urgently to the officers. They sprinted toward him, staying low along the riverbank to avoid being seen by Reynolds' security team. Frank spotted them, relief washing over his weathered face. "Thank God," he said as they reached him. "When your father called saying you were headed here, I thought we might be too late." "My dad called you," Emily asked, breathless from their escape. "But you were arrested." Frank's expression hardened. "Phony charges dropped as soon as your father called in some old favors. James served with half these officers in the Gulf War. Loyalty to him runs deeper than Reynolds' money, at least for some." Emily looked around, realizing the police presence wasn't standard River Oak officers. "These aren't local police. County Sheriff's Department," Frank confirmed. "Outside Reynolds' direct influence. And that," he pointed to a dark sedan where two men in suits were emerging, "is the FBI. Your father's been in contact with them for months, building on your mother's work." As if summoned by the mention, James Carter appeared, pushing through a group of officers. When he saw Emily, his stoic facade crumbled, relief and fear warring in his expression as he pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I told you to wait," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "to let me handle this." "I had to know the truth," Emily replied, clinging to her father with the same intensity. "About Mom, about what happened to her." James pulled back his hands on her shoulders. "I've been gathering evidence since she died, building a case slowly, carefully. When you called, I knew you'd stumbled onto something big and dangerous." "We found it, Dad," Emily said, reaching into her pocket for the samples she'd collected. "All of it. Everything Mom was looking for." As she handed over the sample, a commotion at the facility entrance drew their attention. Officers were escorting Charles Reynolds and his security team out in handcuffs, while others carried boxes of seized evidence. Among the FBI agents stood a man Emily didn't recognize, tall, with dark hair and intense eyes that seemed to look through rather than at people. When he spotted their group, he approached purposefully. "You must be Emily," he said, his voice carrying a weight of personal investment beyond professional interest. "I'm Daniel Morrison. Your mother was helping my father with his investigation when they both ran into trouble." The pieces connected in Emily's mind. W.M. William Morrison, the investigative reporter mentioned in her mother's video. "Your father disappeared a year before my mom's accident." Daniel nodded grimly. "He was getting too close to the truth about Reynolds. When he vanished, I continued his work from inside the system." He gestured to his FBI credentials. "It's taken years to build a case strong enough to move against someone with Charles Reynolds' connections." Emily touched her repaired necklace, the maple leaf pendant that had started this journey. "My mom hid a note inside this with your father's initials." "Insurance," Daniel said. "She knew if anything happened to her, the necklace would come to you. She trusted you would find the message when the time was right." As the gravity of the situation settled around them, Emily watched Charles Reynolds being placed in a police car. Their eyes met briefly through the window, the powerful man who had built an empire on secrets and suffering, now facing the consequences of his actions. In that moment, Emily understood what her mother had fought for, not just justice for the victims of Reynolds' environmental crimes, but the principle that truth mattered, that even the most powerful weren't above accountability. The repaired necklace hung around her neck, its seams visible, but its strength restored. Like the truth about River Oak, it had been broken, but not destroyed, waiting for someone with the courage to make it whole again. As dawn broke over the abandoned water treatment facility, Emily stood with her father, Frank the Freemans, and Daniel Morrison, an unlikely alliance formed in the pursuit of long-delayed justice. The fight wasn't over. Reynolds' influence extended far beyond River Oak, and powerful forces would resist the coming revelations. But for the first time in 3 years, Emily felt her mother's presence not as an absence, but as a continuing legacy. A commitment to truth that connected them across time, stronger than death, more enduring than grief. The maple leaf pendant caught the first rays of morning sun, the letter S once again whole, its meaning finally clear. Not for Sarah, but for Sunfish, the code name her mother had used in her investigation, drawn from the species most affected by Reynolds' chemical dumping. A symbol of what had been lost, what had been found, and what would now at last be brought into the light. In the harsh fluorescent light of the River Oak County Sheriff's Office, Emily sat wrapped in a borrowed blanket. her fingers still tracing the repaired seam of her necklace. The events at the water treatment facility had set in motion a process larger than she could have imagined. FBI agents collected statements, evidence bags accumulated on desks, and uniformed deputies moved with the focused energy of a major investigation. James Carter hadn't left his daughter's side since their reunion at the facility. Now he sat beside her, his weathered hands clasped tightly around a styrofoam cup of coffee that had long gone cold. "You should have told me," Emily said quietly, breaking a lengthy silence between them. "About Mom, about what you suspected all these years." James stared into his untouched coffee. "After the accident, I wanted to burn Reynolds Enterprises to the ground. But then I thought about you, just 14, already devastated by losing your mother. What would happen if you lost me, too?" He set the cup down, turning to face her fully. "So I made a choice. I'd pursue justice, but carefully, methodically. No risks, no confrontations that could leave you an orphan. Meanwhile, I was making the same choice Mom did," Emily said, understanding flowing between them. "Without even knowing it." A sad smile crossed James's face. "You're so much like her, Em. The same determination, the same moral compass. She would have been proud of what you did today." Across the room, Daniel Morrison was deep in conversation with Sheriff Camden, a stern woman in her 50s who had jurisdiction over the entire county, including River Oak. Their discussion seemed tense, with Daniel gesturing emphatically while the sheriff maintained a more reserved posture. Noah and his mother sat nearby, Martha Freeman, providing a detailed account to an FBI agent about what they discovered in the facility. Frank Williams stood by the windows, his gaze periodically scanning the parking lot as if expecting trouble to arrive at any moment. Daniel finally broke away from the sheriff and approached the Carters. The intensity in his eyes had not diminished since their first meeting, but there was something else there now: respect and perhaps a hint of cautious optimism. "Your statements have been incredibly helpful," he said, taking a seat across from them. "Combined with the physical evidence from the facility, we have enough to hold Reynolds while we build the larger case." "What happens now?" Emily asked. Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Reynolds has already called in his lawyers, top firms from Columbus and Chicago. They'll fight every step of the way, argue the evidence was obtained illegally, claim you were trespassing." "We were," Emily acknowledged. "Fortunately, that doesn't invalidate what we found based on your information," Daniel continued. "The FBI had enough probable cause for the warrant once we confirmed active operations in a supposedly abandoned facility. But this is just the beginning." James nodded grimly. "Charles Reynolds isn't just some small-town businessman. His company has government contracts, political connections all the way to Washington. He won't go down without a fight. And his reach in River Oak is considerable," Daniel agreed, "which brings me to our immediate concern." He glanced at Sheriff Camden, who was now on the phone, her expression hardening. "We need to move you to a secure location while this unfolds." Emily straightened, alarm replacing her exhaustion. "Why Reynolds is in custody?" "Reynolds Enterprises isn't just Charles," Daniel explained. "It's a network of executive security personnel and influential figures who benefit from the company's operations. Many of them have as much to lose as Charles does if the full extent of the contamination becomes public." Frank joined their conversation, his gruff voice adding urgency. "The sheriff just got word that Mayor Miller has called an emergency town council meeting for this morning. They're claiming jurisdiction over the water treatment facility as town property." "Can they do that?" Emily asked. "They can try," Daniel replied. "Delay tactics attempts to control the narrative. Standard procedure when a corrupt system is threatened." James stood, his protective instincts visibly rising. "Where do you want us to go?" "I've arranged a safe house in Columbus," Daniel said. "FBI protection until we can secure indictments against the primary players." Emily looked at Noah and Martha, at Frank, with his bruised wrists from the handcuffs, at her father's exhausted face. All of them had risked everything because they believed in the truth her mother had died protecting. "No," she said firmly. Daniel blinked in surprise. "Excuse me?" "No," Emily repeated, standing to face him. "We're not running. We're not hiding. That's what they want, for us to disappear so they can control the story." "Emily," her father began, concern etched in his features. But she continued, newfound conviction strengthening her voice. "Mom didn't hide. Neither did Mr. Morrison." She nodded toward Daniel. "They stood their ground even knowing the risks. If we leave now, Reynolds' allies will use our absence to spin this however they want." Daniel studied her, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You sound exactly like my father. He said almost the same thing before his last trip to River Oak." "And he disappeared," James pointed out. "Because he was alone," Emily countered. "We're not. We have the FBI, the sheriff's department, each other." She looked around at their small group. And we have something else evidence, so strong even Reynolds can't make it disappear. Frank's weathered face creased in a reluctant smile. The girl's got a point. Running now just plays into their hands. What are you suggesting instead? Daniel asked, curiosity replacing his initial resistance. Emily's mind worked quickly, piecing together a strategy. The town council meeting. We should be there, all of us. Show the evidence, speak the truth publicly where it can't be buried or distorted. Martha Freeman nodded slowly. A public record, witnesses, local media. More importantly, Noah added the townspeople. Most of River Oak has no idea what Reynolds has been doing. They deserve to know what's been making them sick all these years. Daniel exchanged a look with Sheriff Camden, who had finished her call and joined their circle. The sheriff's expression was grudgingly impressed. It's risky, she said, but it might be our best chance to break Reynolds' hold on this town once and for all. A public reckoning. I can have agents stationed throughout the town hall, Daniel offered, and the evidence we've already secured is more than enough to present a compelling case. James looked at his daughter, conflict evident in his expression. Finally, he sighed. Your mother would have done the same thing. He placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. We face this together then. As they formulated their plan, none of them noticed the deputy who slipped out of the station phone pressed to his ear as he urgently relayed information to someone on the other end, someone very interested in the Carter family's next move. What? River Oak Town Hall stood at the center of the community, a colonial-style brick building with white columns and a clock tower that had marked time for generations. Built in 1820, it had witnessed the town's evolution from a small farming community to a manufacturing hub dominated by Reynolds Enterprises. By 9 a.m., the council chambers were filled beyond capacity. News of Charles Reynolds' arrest had spread through River Oak like wildfire, drawing citizens eager to learn what could possibly have brought down the town's most powerful figure. Local reporters set up cameras, while uniformed deputies maintained order along the walls. Mayor Robert Miller presided from the central seat at the raised council table, flanked by 6 council members. All of them, Emily noted, with direct ties to Reynolds Enterprises. The mayor's silver hair and practiced smile projected calm authority, but the tightness around his eyes betrayed his concern. This emergency session of the River Oak Town Council will come to order, Mayor Miller announced, gaveling over the murmurs of the crowd. In light of last night's unfortunate events at the former water treatment facility, we are here to address concerns and clarify jurisdictional matters. Emily sat between her father and Daniel Morrison in the front row, Frank Williams and the Freemans beside them. Sheriff Camden stood near the entrance, her deputies strategically positioned throughout the room. FBI agents in suits were less conspicuous, but equally vigilant, their watchful eyes scanning for potential threats. Before we proceed, Mayor Miller continued, I want to emphasize that Charles Reynolds has not been convicted of any crime. These allegations represent one side of a complex situation, and we urge the community to withhold judgment until all facts are known. Daniel leaned over to whisper to Emily, classic deflection, establish doubt before the evidence is even presented. Mayor Miller cleared his throat. Now, as to the matter of the water treatment facility, if I may, Mayor Miller, Sheriff Camden interrupted, rising from her position, the facility is currently a federal crime scene under joint jurisdiction of the FBI and the county sheriff's office. The town council has no authority to interfere with an active investigation. The mayor's smile tightened further. Sheriff, no one is suggesting interference. We merely seek clarification about a town-owned property that has been until last night peacefully abandoned for over 20 years. Peacefully abandoned. The question came from James Carter, who had risen to his feet. Is that what you call a secret chemical dumping operation that has been poisoning this community for decades? A ripple of shocked whispers spread through the crowd. Mayor Miller banged his gavel, attempting to restore order. Mr. Carter, while we sympathize with your family's loss, these inflammatory accusations are supported by extensive evidence. Daniel cut in, standing beside James. He held up his FBI credentials for all to see. Daniel Morrison, Federal Bureau of Investigation, we have confirmed the presence of an active illegal chemical processing operation within the supposedly abandoned facility directly linked to Reynolds Enterprises. The council members exchanged uneasy glances as Daniel continued. Furthermore, we have documentation proving that Charles Reynolds and others were aware of the health risks posed by compound RF-27, yet continued its production and improper disposal into River Oak's water supply. Mayor Miller's facade of control began to crack. These are serious allegations that must be thoroughly investigated before. They have been investigated, Emily said, her clear voice cutting through the tension. She stood the repaired necklace visible against her shirt. My mother, Sarah Carter, investigated them 3 years ago, before her car mysteriously went off Miller Bridge. The crowd erupted in murmurs again, louder this time. Many present had known Sarah had attended her funeral, had brought casseroles to the Carter home in the weeks following the tragedy. Young lady, the mayor attempted, this is neither the time nor place for unsubstantiated conspiracy theories. They're not theories, Emily replied steadily, and I have proof. With a nod from Daniel, an FBI technician set up a projector. The lights dimmed and suddenly Sarah Carter's face appeared on the wall behind the council table, the same video Emily and Noah had discovered on the USB drive. The council chambers fell silent as Sarah's voice filled the room, detailing the evidence she had gathered about Reynolds Enterprises' illegal activities, the chemical dumping that covered up health effects, and her suspicions about the fates of previous whistleblowers. When the video ended, the silence was absolute. Then from the back of the room, a woman stood. Emily recognized her as Mrs. Kendrick, whose daughter had died of a rare cancer 2 years earlier. My Lizzie was 16 when she died, Mrs. Kendrick said, her voice trembling. The doctors said they'd never seen that type of cancer in someone so young. They called it a tragic anomaly. Her eyes found Mayor Miller. Was my daughter just an anomaly, Robert, or was she collateral damage for Reynolds' profits? Before the mayor could respond, another resident stood. My father worked at Reynolds for 30 years, died of liver failure last spring. The doctors couldn't explain why his liver was deteriorating when he barely drank. One by one, citizens rose, sharing stories of unusual illnesses, unexplained deaths, miscarriages, and birth defects that had long been dismissed as bad luck or genetic flukes. The pattern that emerged matched exactly what Sarah Carter had documented: clusters of health issues concentrated in neighborhoods drawing water from certain sources. As the testimonies continued, Emily noticed a subtle shift in the room's energy. The shock and disbelief were giving way to something more powerful: collective anger. Decades of suffering were being recontextualized in real-time personal tragedies, transformed into evidence of corporate malfeasance. Mayor Miller banged his gavel repeatedly, attempting to regain control of the meeting. Please, this is becoming a spectacle rather than a productive discussion. We need to approach these serious matters with proper procedure. Proper procedure. Frank Williams stood, his voice carrying the weight of his years in law enforcement. Like when you ordered the police chief to shut down the investigation into Diane Matthews' disappearance in '92, or when you helped Reynolds rezone the land around the old facility to prevent environmental testing. The mayor's face flushed red. Those are outrageous accusations from a disgruntled former officer with a personal vendetta. They're documented facts, Frank countered, nodding to Daniel, who produced a folder of papers. Officers' logs, meeting minutes, rezoning applications with your signature alongside Reynolds. All part of the federal investigation now. Mayor Miller looked to his fellow council members for support, but found them shifting uncomfortably in their seats, already calculating their own legal exposure. The unified front was crumbling. In the momentary lull, Emily stepped forward, moving to the center of the room where everyone could see her. The pendant around her neck hair caught the light, drawing eyes to the visible repair line that marked where it had been broken and restored. 3 days ago, Vanessa Reynolds and her friends destroyed this necklace, my mother's necklace. She began, her voice quiet but carrying in the hushed chamber. They thought they were just being cruel to the quiet girl who'd lost her mom. They didn't know they were setting in motion exactly what my mother had planned. Emily held up the maple leaf pendant. Inside this necklace, my mother hid evidence, a message that would lead to the truth if anything happened to her. She knew the risks she was taking by investigating Reynolds Enterprises, but she did it anyway, because she believed this town, her home, deserved better than to be slowly poisoned for profit. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of neighbors, teachers, shopkeepers, people who had watched her grow up, who had attended her mother's funeral, who had no idea of the forces that had shaped their community's health for decades. My mother died because she discovered the truth. Charles Reynolds and his allies couldn't let her expose what they'd done, what they were still doing, so they silenced her, just like they silenced Diane Matthews, just like they silenced William Morrison, just like they've tried to silence anyone who threatened their power. Emily turned to face the council directly. But they couldn't silence all of us, and they can't hide the evidence anymore. Daniel stepped forward, taking over the technical presentation. On the screen appeared test results, internal memos, chemical analyses, and health statistics, the accumulated evidence from Sarah's USB drive, Frank's decades-long investigation, and what they discovered at the facility. Reynolds Enterprises has been illegally manufacturing and disposing of RF-27, a compound known to cause cellular mutations linked to cancer, birth defects, and organ failure, Daniel explained. Their own internal studies confirmed these risks as early as 1984, yet they continued production in secret after federal regulations banned the compound. He clicked to the next slide, a map of River Oak with overlaid health statistics. The pattern is undeniable. Neighborhoods receiving water downstream from the facility show cancer rates 340% above the national average. Birth defects occur at 5 times the expected rate. Reynolds knew this and actively covered it up, bribing officials, falsifying water quality reports, and when necessary, eliminating those who discovered the truth. The evidence was damning, comprehensive, and impossible to dismiss. As Daniel concluded his presentation, a heavy silence fell over the council chambers. Mayor Miller, his authority visibly diminished, attempted one last deflection. These are complex scientific matters that require expert analysis before what, Robert? The question came from Margaret Cooper, who had risen from her seat beside Noah. The elderly teacher's voice carried the moral authority of her 72 years in River Oak. Before more children die, before more families suffer, how many more sacrifices for Reynolds' profits are acceptable to you? The mayor had no answer. Sheriff Camden stepped forward. Mayor Miller, in light of the evidence presented and your own apparent complicity in these matters, I am placing you under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and as an accessory to environmental crimes. As deputies moved toward the council table, chaos erupted. Some council members tried to flee, only to be intercepted by FBI agents. Reporters rushed forward, cameras flashing. Citizens shouted questions, demands, expressions of outrage. In the midst of the tumult, Emily felt a hand grip her arm. She turned to find Vanessa Reynolds, her face pale and drawn eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Did you know?" Vanessa asked, her voice barely audible above the noise. "When we broke your necklace, did you know what would happen?" Emily shook her head. "I had no idea. I just wanted to fix what was broken." Something shifted in Vanessa's expression. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. "My father called me last night from jail. Told me to get out of town, that things were about to get ugly." She swallowed hard. He said he did it all for us, for our family's legacy." Before Emily could respond, James appeared at her side, protectively placing himself between the two girls. "Vanessa, you should go home." "Home?" Vanessa laughed bitterly. "To the mansion built with poison money, to wait for the FBI to seize everything." She looked back at Emily. "Your mother died because of my father, because of my family. How do I live with that?" The question hung between them, impossible to answer simply. Emily thought of the past 3 years, the grief, the anger, the loneliness, the journey from victim to truth seeker. "One day at a time," she said finally. "That's all any of us can do." As Vanessa melted back into the crowd, Emily felt the weight of the moment, not just personal vindication, but the beginning of a painful reckoning for all of River Oak. The town would never be the same after today. Neither would she. The following weeks unfolded in a blur of legal proceedings, media coverage, and community upheaval. Charles Reynolds, Mayor Miller, and 4 council members were indicted on federal charges ranging from environmental crimes to conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Reynolds Enterprises was placed under federal receivership, its assets frozen pending the outcome of multiple investigations. The human cost of the scandal emerged in stark relief as health records were reviewed and previously disconnected cases were linked to RF-27 exposure. Over 300 River Oak residents had died from conditions potentially related to the chemical contamination. Hundreds more lived with chronic illnesses, their suffering now contextualized as corporate collateral damage rather than bad luck. For Emily, the revelations brought a complex mix of emotions. Vindication for her mother's work, justice for her death, but also an awareness of how much larger the tragedy was than her personal loss. Sarah Carter had been just one victim among many, though perhaps the one with the most foresight, ensuring the truth would eventually emerge, even if she couldn't deliver it herself. On a crisp November morning, Emily stood before her mother's grave in River Oak Cemetery. The maple trees had shed their leaves, creating a carpet of gold and crimson around the headstone. She'd come alone, needing this moment of quiet communion after weeks of testimonies, interviews, and public scrutiny. "We did it, Mom," she said softly, placing fresh flowers beside the granite marker. "Reynolds is facing charges. The truth is out. Everything you worked for, You calm. Her voice trailed off as she touched the repaired necklace, her talisman, through all that had happened. The pendant's visible seam reminded her daily that broken things could be mended, that damage didn't have to be the end of the story. Emily. She turned to find Daniel Morrison approaching along the cemetery path, his tall figure silhouetted against the morning sun. In the weeks since the town council meeting, he had become a familiar presence coordinating the federal investigation while providing support to the Carter family. Sorry to intrude, he said, stopping a respectful distance away. Your father said I might find you here. Emily nodded toward the adjacent empty plot. This is where they'll bury my dad someday. He comes here every Sunday, talks to Mom like she can hear him. A small smile crossed her face. Maybe she can. Daniel's expression softened. If anyone deserves that comfort, it's James Carter. His testimony has been instrumental in building the case against Reynolds. How's it looking? Emily asked, falling into step beside Daniel as they walked slowly back toward the cemetery entrance. Strong, Reynolds' legal team is trying every delay tactic in the book, but the evidence is overwhelming. The chemical analysis from the samples you collected matched perfectly with the health impacts documented in Sarah's research. He hesitated, then added, We've also located William Morrison's remains. Emily stopped walking. Your father, Daniel nodded briefly, overshadowing his professional demeanor. A construction crew found him buried beneath a concrete foundation at one of Reynolds' development sites. Forensics confirmed it was him. I'm so sorry, Emily said, understanding all too well the complex emotions that came with such closure. It's what I expected, Daniel replied after a moment. But knowing for certain, it matters. He looked at her directly. Just like knowing what really happened to your mother matters. The investigation had confirmed what Emily and Frank had suspected. Sarah Carter's car had been deliberately tampered with, the brake lines severed in a way designed to appear as mechanical failure. The case had officially been reclassified from accident to homicide, with Charles Reynolds as the primary suspect. There's something else, Daniel continued as they reached the cemetery gates. Something I wanted to discuss with you and your father together. At the Carter home, James was waiting on the porch, a habit he'd developed since the revelations had begun, keeping watch, still protective despite the reduced threat. The house itself was unchanged, a modest two-bedroom that had always been enough for their small family. What had transformed was the community around it. Neighbors who had once kept a polite distance now brought casseroles and offers of help. Former Reynolds employees stopped by to share information they'd withheld out of fear. Even Emily's teachers had approached with apologies for not noticing the bullying, for not connecting the dots, for their complicity in the town's collective silence. James greeted Daniel with a firm handshake, the two men having developed a mutual respect born from shared purpose in similar losses. Inside, they settled in the living room, where so many discussions about Sarah's case had taken place over the past weeks. I've been authorized to share some developments with you. Daniel began, his tone shifting to something more formal. The investigation has expanded beyond River Oak. We've identified at least 3 other communities where Reynolds Enterprises established similar operations, small towns with limited resources economically dependent on Reynolds' presence. Other towns like River Oak? Emily asked. With the same contamination. Daniel nodded grimly. Preliminary testing suggests yes. The pattern is consistent: abandoned industrial sites repurposed for illegal chemical production. Local officials bought off or intimidated health impacts, systematically denied or obscured. James leaned forward, his expression hardening. How many people are we talking about? Thousands potentially. RF-27 has a cumulative effect in groundwater. Even low-level exposure over decades can be devastating. Daniel placed a folder on the coffee table. This is why I'm here. The Justice Department is establishing a special task force focused specifically on Reynolds Enterprises' environmental crimes across multiple states. They've asked me to lead it. He opened the folder, revealing official documents. And I'd like both of you to join as special advisors. Your first-hand knowledge of Reynolds' operations combined with Sarah's research would be invaluable. Emily exchanged a surprised look with her father. Us, but I'm still in high school and Dad works at the steel mill. The position would include relocation assistance, employment for your father within the task force's support staff, and arrangements for you to complete your education while contributing to the investigation. Daniel smiled slightly. Your insights have already proven more valuable than those of agents with decades of experience, Emily. You see connections others miss. James studied the proposal thoughtfully. Leaving River Oak, it's a big step. This has been our home despite everything. I understand, Daniel assured him. But consider this: your family's story has inspired others to come forward in these other communities. People who lost loved ones, who suffered health effects, who were silenced by the same tactics used against Sarah. They need advocates who understand what they're facing. Emily thought about the deeper meaning of what Daniel was offering, not just justice for her mother, but an opportunity to extend that justice to others who had suffered similarly, to transform their family tragedy into a force for broader change. Her hand went to the necklace, tracing the maple leaf's outline. What would Sarah have wanted? The answer seemed clear. Her mother had risked everything to expose the truth, not just for River Oak, but because she believed no one should be poisoned for profit, no matter where they lived. When would we start? Emily asked, decision forming in her mind. Daniel's expression brightened. After the new year. There's still much to do here, first testimonies to complete evidence to process, and I imagine you'd want time to properly say goodbye. James looked at his daughter, seeking confirmation. When she nodded, he turned back to Daniel. We're in. Sarah would have wanted us to see this through to the end, wherever it leads. As they discussed the details, Emily felt a subtle shift in her perception of the future. For 3 years since her mother's death, she had existed in a kind of suspended animation, going through the motions of life without any real direction. Now a path was emerging, one that honored her mother's legacy while creating something new. Later that evening, after Daniel had left with their provisional acceptance, Emily sat on the porch swing beside her father. The November air was cold, but neither moved to go inside, both finding comfort in the quietude after weeks of intensity. Are you sure about this? James asked finally. Leaving River Oak, taking on Reynolds beyond what's already happened, it won't be easy. Emily considered the question seriously. I'm sure about continuing what Mom started, about making sure other families get the answers we finally have. She looked out at their modest street, at the town that had shaped her entire life. River Oak will always be home, but maybe our purpose lies elsewhere now. James nodded, understanding. Your mother always said everything happens for a reason. I never believed that until now. He put his arm around Emily's shoulders. She'd be so proud of you, Em, not just for finding the truth, but for what you're choosing to do with it. As they sat together in the gathering darkness, Emily thought about the journey that had begun with a broken necklace and a hidden message, about how acts of cruelty could inadvertently set truth in motion, about how a 17-year-old girl's stand against bullies had ultimately exposed decades of corporate crime. Most of all, she thought about her mother not as the tragic figure whose absence had defined Emily's teenage years, but as the courageous woman who had faced impossible odds to protect her community, her family, and her principles. The maple leaf pendant rested against Emily's collarbone, its repaired seam a permanent reminder that broken things could become stronger at the places they'd been damaged. Like the necklace, Emily herself had been broken by loss, but made stronger by truth. The visible scars were not weaknesses, but testaments to resilience. As stars appeared in the clear November sky above River Oak, Emily Carter embraced the path forward, one that would take her far from the small Ohio town where she'd grown up, but closer to the legacy her mother had left behind. A legacy not of victimhood, but of unwavering courage in the face of powerful opposition. The truth once shattered and hidden had been pieced back together, and like the repaired necklace that had started it all, it would never again be broken. 3 months later, Emily stood before a congressional subcommittee in Washington, D.C., the repaired maple leaf necklace visible against her formal attire. At 17, she was an unusual witness in such proceedings, but her first-hand account of River Oak's tragedy had captured national attention. The documents before you detail not just what happened in my hometown, she testified, her voice steady despite the imposing setting, but a pattern repeated across America: corporations exploiting small communities, poisoning citizens, and silencing opposition through intimidation, corruption, and violence. The chamber was packed with journalists, environmental advocates, and citizens from affected communities. In the front row sat James Carter and Daniel Morrison alongside Frank Williams and Martha Freeman, the unlikely alliance that had exposed Reynolds Enterprises' crimes. My mother died because she discovered this truth, Emily continued. William Morrison died because he was reporting it. Diane Matthews disappeared because she questioned it. But their voices weren't silenced. They were amplified by those of us who carried on their work. She touched the necklace, the symbol of her journey that had become in the media coverage of the case, an emblem of resilience against corporate power. The citizens of River Oak and other affected communities don't want your sympathy. They want accountability, justice, and assurance that no other town will suffer as they have. They want systems that protect people, not profits. As Emily concluded her testimony, her gaze moved to the back of the chamber, where a solitary figure stood watching Vanessa Reynolds, whose family empire was now crumbling under federal indictments. Their eyes met briefly, acknowledgement passing between them of how completely their lives had been transformed by forces set in motion generations before either was born. Outside the hearing room, reporters clamored for statements, cameras flashed, and questions overlapped in a cacophony of interest. Emily moved through it with newfound confidence, her father and their allies forming a protective circle around her. In the marble hallway away from the press, Daniel Morrison handed Emily a small package. "This arrived at the task force office this morning. I thought you should have it immediately." Inside was a weathered leather journal. William Morrison's final notes recovered from a safe deposit box he had established before his disappearance. With it was a photograph of William and Sarah Carter standing together outside Reynolds Laboratories, determination evident in their expressions. On the back of the photograph, William had written, "The truth costs everything but is worth the price. SC understands this better than anyone." Emily traced her mother's image with gentle fingers, connecting more deeply with the woman whose courage had set her life's new direction. Sarah Carter hadn't just been Emily's mother, she had been a force for justice, a protector of the vulnerable, a woman who had faced evil and chosen to fight rather than look away. As Emily James and their allies stepped out of the Capitol building into the bright winter sunshine, reporters again surged forward, microphones extended, questions overlapping. "Emily, what's next for the investigation? Mr. Carter, will you pursue civil damages against Reynolds? What about the other communities affected by RF-27? Emily looked to her father, who nodded encouragingly. She stepped forward in the repaired necklace, catching the light as she addressed not just the press, but the watching world beyond. "This isn't the end of the story," she said clearly. "It's the beginning of accountability. My mother believed one person with the truth could make a difference, even against the most powerful interests. She was right, but she didn't have to stand alone, and neither do those still fighting for justice in communities like River Oak across America." She touched the necklace one final time, the maple leaf pendant that had carried her mother's secret message across years of silence. The broken piece made whole again through persistence and care. The truth was shattered but not destroyed, and now that it's been pieced back together, nothing will break it again. Behind her, James Carter watched his daughter with pride mingled with bittersweet recognition. In Emily's stance, her clear voice, her unwavering principles, Sarah lived on not as a ghost of the past, but as a beacon guiding their shared future. In River Oak, citizens gathered around televisions and homes, diners, and shops to watch Emily's testimony. Among them were those who had lost loved ones to Reynolds chemicals, those who had worked unwittingly in contaminated facilities, those who had looked the other way out of fear or economic necessity. As Emily spoke of accountability and justice, many wept, not just for what had been lost, but for what had been found. The truth that had been hidden for generations, the connections between suffering that had once seemed random, the power of one family's determination to expose corruption no matter the cost. And in homes across America, in other small towns, where corporate interests overshadowed public health, people watched with growing recognition. Some began checking their own water quality reports. Others started asking questions about unusual illness patterns. Still others looked with new suspicion at the powerful interests controlling their communities. The broken necklace that had started as one family's tragedy had become something larger, a symbol of resistance against forces that had long seemed untouchable. A reminder that even the most carefully buried truths could eventually rise to the surface. For Emily Carter, standing before the cameras with the weight of her mother's legacy around her neck, this was just the beginning. The path ahead would be challenging, the opposition formidable, the work exhausting. But unlike her mother, she would not face it alone. The maple leaf pendant rested against her heart, its repaired seam a testament to resilience. Broken but made whole, damaged but stronger for it. Like Emily herself, like the truth she had helped uncover, like justice long delayed but finally emerging into the light. When the necklace broke, a nation began to heal. When the pieces of a silver necklace hit the floor of River Oak High School, no one could have predicted how the fracture lines would spread, reaching through decades of secrets across generations of silence into the darkest corners of power. What began as an act of cruelty became the catalyst for truth, proving that sometimes things must break before they can be truly mended. Emily Carter lost her mother to corporate greed, but in piecing together the broken pendant, she recovered something more valuable: her mother's courage, her purpose, her voice. The visible seam on that maple leaf became a testament to resilience, a reminder that damage doesn't diminish worth, but reveals character. River Oak will never be the same. Neither will the Carters, the Morrisons, or the countless families whose suffering finally has a name, a cause, a reckoning. Some wounds take generations to heal, some truths decades to surface. Perhaps in your own hometown there are questions left unasked, patterns, unexamined voices silenced too soon. Perhaps there are broken things waiting to be made whole again, if only someone has the courage to pick up the pieces and look carefully at what lies within.